Hello, Transmath 2 class. We are going to work on the notes for 2.3. And so to start off, we are going to compare some fractions. And it looks like they've put in the less than symbol in every one of these comparisons. So that means we want to put the smaller number on the left so that we can say that number is less than the larger number. So we want the smaller number on the left side, the larger number on the right side. Okay, so if we're comparing 1/6 to 5/6, I think it's pretty clear that 1/6 is going to be less than 5/6. So we'll put the 1/6 on the left, 5/6 on the right. And these ones all have common denominators, so it's pretty easy that 1/5 is less than 4/5, and that 2/6 is less than 5/6. Okay, so those were some comparisons with less than symbols. Okay, it says draw the correct fractional part on the number line for each problem. Okay, so we have 3/4 right there, and we got to have 1/4 and 2/4 about evenly spaced in there, right? And so 2/4 is going to be approximately right here. And if we did another one, we'd have 4/4 over here, which would be 1, right? Okay, where's 3/5? Well, if we have 4/5 right here, then that means that we would have 3/5, 2/5. So we gotta have 1/5, 2/5, 3/5 equally spaced in there, about like that. Let me try that again. A little smaller on this one. 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5, and then we'd have like 5/5 over here. Okay, so our 3/5 would be here. If you wanted to label all of them, 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, they've got 4/5, and then 5/5 would be there. We just really needed to do this one. Okay, where's 1/4 in the number line? Okay, well, if 2/4 is here, 1/4 is going to be halfway between 0 and 2/4. So there's your 1/4 right there. And then 2/6. Okay, 3/6 is right in the middle. So I think 2/6 is going to be about there, and then you'd have your 1/6. That's about equally spaced. So your 2/6 would go right there. Okay. All right. So in this lesson, we're going to be using benchmarks to compare fractions. And so your benchmark numbers are going to be numbers like 0, 1, and like 1/2. Because that helps us decide approximately where on the number line each fraction would go. If we can tell if it's larger than 1/2 or smaller than 1/2, or if it's closer to 1 than it is to 1/2, or if it's closer to 0 than it is to 1/2, then we have a pretty good idea where it should sit on the number line. Okay, so what is the relative size of the numerator compared to the denominator? That'll be what we're kind of asking ourselves here. So is it relatively large compared to the denominator, or is it relatively small? And we'll talk about what we mean by that. So where are these fractions in relation to benchmark numbers? 0, 1/2, and 1. Anytime we make a number line, those are really the numbers that we need to have on there, or at least have in mind where that would be. We know that 1/2 is obviously right in the middle. So, but we want to use that as our kind of our gauge to where we would put these other fractions that we're going to talk about. Okay, so those are our benchmark numbers. Okay, now it says with the fraction 5/8, the numerator is relatively large when compared to the denominator. So what do they mean by that? Basically, when they say relatively large compared to, they're saying, is 5, is that closer to 8, or is it closer to 0? That's kind of what they're saying. They're saying, well, is the top number, is it closer to the bottom number, or is it closer like to 0? And 5 would be closer to 8 than it is to 0. And so that's why we would say that it's relatively large, which means it's going to be on the larger side, the right side of 1/2. It's going to fall somewhere in this area. 0's here, 1's here, 1/2 is in the middle. So 5/8, since the 5 is closer to 8, 8/8 over here, right? That's why I'm saying that, because we're talking about eighths, so that would be 8/8. So the 5/8 is going to be somewhere around here, because 0, really you could say that 0/8 is right there. So we would say it's relatively large, meaning it's going to be closer to the 1 than it is to the 0. And you could space them all out, and we could see that that's true and approximately where that would be. Also, some equivalent fractions. 4/8, we're counting by eighths. We know that that's the same as 1/2, right? Because we can see it's right in the middle, right? 4 is half of 8. It's the same as 1/2. Okay, so this fraction, 2/5, we would say the numerator is relatively small when compared to the denominator. If you think about the number 2, that's actually closer to 0 than it is to 5. And so if half is right here, 2/5 is going to be closer to the 0 than it's going to be to the 1. So we would say the numerator is relatively small compared to the denominator. So here's a few where they ask us to fill in the blank. So if we have 1/8, so we ask ourselves, is 1 closer to 0 or is it closer to 8? It's definitely closer to 0, so we would say relatively small. Okay, 3/4. Is 3 closer to 4 or is it closer to 0? If it's closer to 4, then we say it's relatively large. Okay, 11/15. Is 11 closer to 15 or is it closer to 0? Well, it's closer to 15, so again, this would be relatively large. And then 3/10. Is 3 closer to 10 or is it closer to 0? Well, it's going to be closer to 0, so this is relatively small. Okay. And so we have a few more of these. 1/5. 1 is closer to 0 than it is to 5, so that's relatively small. 8/9. Well, 8 is closer to 9 than it is to 0, so this is going to be relatively large. Okay. 2/6. Well, 2 is closer to 0 than it is to 6, so we're going to say relatively small. 1/7. Okay, 1 is closer to 0 than it is to 7, so that's going to be small again. And 3/10. 3 is closer to 0 than it is to 10, so that's going to be small. All right, activity 2. It says write an inequality based on the fractions in each group. So they are giving us a group that have relatively small numerators when compared to the denominators, and then a second group where the numerators are relatively large compared to the denominators. Okay, so looks like each one of these inequalities we're asked to make has a less than symbol. So I guess that would tell me I want to take these smaller fractions, put them on the less than on the left side, and then we can pick a larger fraction to put on the right side. And you can choose, a lot of different ways to do this. I'm just going to pick the first 3. 1/7, change color, 1/7, 3/12, and 1/10. I'm just going to put them in order. And then any of these relatively large ones, I should be able to make a comparison. 1/7 is less than 6/7. Yep. 3/12 is less than 10/12. Yep. And 1/10 is less than 8/9. Yes, those are all true. These are the same kind of groups of numbers. This time I guess I have the larger ones here and the smaller ones here. It says use fractions from above to write 3 inequalities. Now we can write whatever we want. So let's just say I grab 3/4. Now 3/4 is from the large group, so I'm going to say is greater than, and then I'll pick anything from over here in the small group. I'll just pick 1/7. Okay. Now if I pick something from the small group, like 1/5, I'll take 1/5. So that's going to have to be less than anything I choose from this group. So let's see, 1/5 is less than 8/9, let's say. That's true. And I'll go back and I'll choose one from the large group. I'll take 10/12. And so that's going to have to be greater than any number I choose from over here. What haven't I used? Let's take 1/10. Okay, so I have all true statements. And as long as I can say this one's relatively large, this one's relatively small, then I can make my comparison. The bigger one's greater than the smaller one. Here I've got the relatively small, relatively large, so 1/5 is less than 8/9, and so on. Okay. Example 3, it says use the number lines to compare 1/4 and 3/5. So on the first one, let's do fourths. So we'll do 4, fair shares. We'll break it into fourths. So 1/4 is right here, and then on the next one, we're going to break it into fifths. Try that again. Okay, so 3/5. I got 1/5, 2/5, and 3/5. Okay, so I'm comparing 1/4, which is that length, to 3/5, which is that length, right? So the statement, I got a greater than symbol right here. So I want to put the bigger fraction. I can see 3/5 is bigger than 1/4, right? So 3/5 is greater than 1/4. Okay, and so if you make your number lines, you can see, okay, yep, that's pretty small. This one's bigger. So since they want me to use the greater than symbol, that means I want to put the bigger fraction first. 3/5 is greater than 1/4. Okay, in this one we got a sixth and a fifths, right? So we want to do 4/6, 2/5. So I'm going to break the first one into 6 equal pieces the best that I can. So I'm going to cut it in the middle, and then I'm going to do thirds of each of those halves. Go like this. So I got 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, and 4/6, kind of like that. I suppose I could give my 5/6 there, but I'm kind of interested in this length right up to 4/6, right to there. And on the fifths, I'm going to go try to make this into some equal fifths. So it'll be 3/5, 4/5, 5/5. And let me try this again. I really like the way I did that. Okay, so if I got about 2/5 here, 3/5 there, 4/5, and 1/5. All right, so I got 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5, and 5/5 at the end. Okay, and I want to go to 2/5 right to there. Now I can make my comparison. I can see 2/5 is less than 4/6, but they have a greater than symbol there. So that means I want to put 4/6 first. So I'll put 4/6 because I know that that's greater than 2/5, right? So remember this symbol, greater than. And it looks like that's it. Okay, so those are your notes for 2.3.